spending requirement. Again, I don't recall having issues with the city of Holyoke in the past
Right, that's why
about
we
these
were
things.
surprised.
Because if they're, well, again, it's not surprising that as an anomaly, one year you may be below the net school spending target. It's not the end of the world, but it can happen. And from my discussions with folks in the school department, there was an issue with, I guess, transportation, and there was funds that had to be shifted to fund the transportation issue, and that, again, they may have been initially thought of to be used for salaries or something like that, and if it ended up having to go to transportation that's not eligible for net school spending,
Okay, so that,
it ends up exacerbating that situation. So you may have budgeted right at net school spending, but if you transferred $10,000 to transportation, now you're $10,000 short. So,
Sure.
oh, please.
so then if you're also in the process of right-sizing, given the changes in the student population, that would also affect it if you had unexpended or decreasing salaries
Well,
because of
again,
unemployment?
that could be another reason why at the end of the year, they didn't spend, the school committee did not spend its entire
And so that
appropriation.
would be a temporary thing that would, over time.
Yeah, and it's built into our regulations that basically say, in the event that you don't meet the net school spending requirements, any funds that are left in the school appropriation at the end of the year, just remain available to the school committee without further appropriation for the next year, because, and again, that's to help, obviously, to meet the net school spending in the following year, so you don't have to appropriate additional funds.
And so as we look forward to next year with the new charter school opening, isn't it in Westfield?
It's not
Is-
opening, it's not opening next fall.
It's opening-
It's not this fall, it's scheduled to open the fall
Year
after.
after?
Yes, that's
So we
correct.
won't have to worry about that this year?
Not for this fall. And hopefully, we don't have to worry that much about it next fall either.
No, but you're very right, that could be a potential impact, obviously, on the budget.
Right, it's
that
only
you
the
should be
next
aware
town.
of. Yeah. I think it's April 1st, we usually get some kind of inclination in terms of what that impact might be, so that would be next April 1st that you'd know about that.
Okay, thank you.
Peter, and then Joe?
Yeah, thanks for coming down and explaining it. It's really enlightened us of how this all works with the net school spending, especially the part about transferring some money that was actually supposed to be used, say for employees or whatever, and then transferred, because the school budget, the transportation is short, so all of a sudden now you're taking money, and that's what could affect it, like you said, $10,000 or $20,000. Doesn't have to take much. Could you sort of explain the charter school assessment a little bit and how that number could be very change and?
Well, I think the volatility is more based on the actual enrollment versus what the projected enrollment is, to be
Right.
quite honest with you. And again, you do get a little bit of reimbursement for additional costs that you have in the current fiscal year, because there is a line item in the state budget for charter reimbursements that helps fund any additional expenses that you may have in the current fiscal year over what you spent last year. So for instance, if you spent $10 million last year and you're spending $11 million this year, that extra $1 million is subject to appropriation for that one, for the first year. Now, it's, the way the law is written, you're supposed to get 100% reimbursement and then 25% over the next 5 years.
Right.
But that hasn't been funded appropriately. I think as it stands right now, you're receiving about 80% of the first year, 100%. So you're not even getting 100%, but you're getting at least 80% of that increase from one year to the next in the current fiscal year. That money gets sent out as well. But again, it can be volatile. It can be, because kids leave charter schools, there's movement, in between the charter schools during the year. So we're constantly monitoring that throughout the year, and it can have an impact.
And then that money, if it was more money in that budget, the estimate's low, that money goes to the school department or the city?
Well, again, let's use both scenarios, right? If there's a scenario where it's budgeted too high and those kids aren't going to that school, you're definitely not going to meet your net school spending unless, depending on what you've given the schools. I mean, districts like Holyoke have a tendency to just fund like right at or slightly above.
Seeing that in the graph.
The minimum. So if your budgeting is that tight and you have that kind of volatility, you'd be way below net school spending if that was the case. Yeah. It doesn't see, that occurs more frequently than you budgeted 10 million and it ended up being 15 million. I'm not sure if I think anything of that has ever occurred, that anybody was that surprised. Because, number one, there's caps on the amount of seats that are in charter schools. There's also caps on the amount of net school spending that a district can spend on charter school tuition as well. So it's highly unlikely that it would go the other way. More than likely, the way that usually happens is that the numbers come in lower. So, and as a result, you thought you were going to be spending, say, $15 million on charter school tuition, but now you're only spending 13? Well, that $2 million is considered part of net school spending in terms of your budget. So if that money gets moved to anything that's not net school spending related, you're going to be below net school spending. So if you decided to move that $2 million to transportation, you're not going to meet depending on how you budget it, you're not going to meet your net school spending. So it's, if you decide then to say, well, again, I think Anthony was mentioning something about unemployment. If you have unemployment expenses, which again is an operating expense that is a net school spending allowable expense, that would count towards net school spending. So if you had extra money and that money ended up going to pay for unemployment benefits or something like that, that is a net school spending category because that's an employee benefit, an operating cost.
Okay. That makes it a little bit clearer for me. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I'm not trying to tell you how to build a Swiss watch when you ask me what time it is.
It helped.
Joe has a question. You have a follow-up? All right, Joe?
Thank you, Counselor. And Jay, welcome, and we appreciate the very historical explanation of ed reform. I'm not going to date myself, but I was 13 years on the council before ed reform, so I remember state aid, and I remember school budgets when we were one budget, and we all controlled it together, the good and the bad, and made things balance at the end of the year. Ed reform took a lot of that away from us. Our good school committee members, some who were behind you, have taken that charge over the years of balancing or attempting to balance the state budget. And I think our questions that started at our last meeting, you've answered historically, but you made a comment 2 minutes ago that I'd like to take a step further. And it's, we see, up until this year, we see a school budget which is 2 line items in the city budget. And we're told, projected, this is what we need to do to meet net school spending. Both Anthony, Dr. Zreich, and now yourself this evening have told us, and I understand a budget is a moving target throughout the year, have told us that things happened during the course of the year within the school department that could reduce net school spending, and yet we, on this side of the arena, have no say over that.
That's correct.
Now, to my knowledge, we never got a letter from you, so we must be doing something right. But we're sitting here with some, even for the end of the year, trying to reconcile the budget, some astronomical requests for transfers. And that deals with unemployment, deals with transportation, and the city was warned transportation budget was low last year. The mayor chose not to do anything about it. But how do we reconcile a budget when, until it's done, we don't know what net school spending is?
Well, again, let's talk reality. The schools are a department of the city and town. You have a city auditor who must have keeping track of all expenses that the school
He
department.
turns to the schools and asks the schools what's going on. And I know that for a fact, Anthony.
I think you have an issue with your city auditor then.
Well, there's a little historical there too. We lost a good city auditor who I think told us what was going on and worked very close with the
Well,
schools.
again, the city keeps the official records of the city, obviously. So, obviously I would expect someone on the city side to be fairly cognizant of these kinds of issues and be in communication with the school department. So at least that they reconcile to make sure that, expenditures are in line or whatever. Obviously, I would honestly say that I would consider that to be a function of the city audit office, to working obviously with the school department as well, just to make sure that that happens, because they're the official record keeper of the city. So I'm
in
a
agreement
little
with-
confused that,
I'm in agreement with you. I'm just telling you, we were told
Yeah.
point blank, that's not going on. And I don't want to get into the, we're in receivership, deal, but typically the school committee will be doing this, not us. And the school committee would, I think, be looking for the answers and reconciling their budget from a different perspective, but trying to do what's best for the school department budget. Jay, I'm in agreement with you. But we were told
I
point blank.
understand it's
that
a
is not
frustrating
happening.
situation, but
Yeah.
I'd be happy to meet with your city auditor and with the school department.
We just hired a new auditor, and we have some good hope and some high hope for the new person, and if we don't burn him out too quick, I think he'll do a great job. The second part of it is, and we talked a little about this at the last meeting, and you said something this evening, is, maybe I'm too old school, but at the end of the year, any monies that are not encumbered go back into the general budget, become free cash, and can be reappropriated as needed for the next year.
If you
Yep.
met net school spending.
Right.
If you met net school spending.
In terms of the school side, I'm talking about the school committee appropriation only now. Everything else, and if you've met net school spending, yeah, that's true. Absolutely, it all flows to free cash at the end of the year, absolutely.
The school department, and this predates Dr. Reich, has never returned a dollar to the general budget. Now, if the school department can determine when to put money into transportation from what could be operating expenses, there's an easy shuffle to do at the end of the year to be able to keep dollars for the next year, if you don't have an auditor watching them.
I'm not sure I'm getting where you're heading with this.
We're trying to reconcile a budget, and it's very difficult, predate ed reform, when state aid went to we divided it amongst all departments, for quality of life purposes within the city itself. I'm not trying to make an argument about the merit of Education Reform Act. I understand it, I believe in it, and I think schools are important and schools have benefited from that act. But the rest of the city, the poorest community in the Commonwealth you're sitting in now, also has their needs and their demands. And if we have no control over net school spending, our portion,
Even if you had a school committee, well, I'm sure you still do have a school committee. I just met somebody who's on the committee.
they have no line item control over the budget. We have no line item control over your budget.
Under normal circumstances, if a
Correct.
district is not under receivership, the school committee would control its budget under Chapter 71, Section 34. And again, they would be asking you for one number in terms of what that number is. Now, obviously, I'm sure they'd be sharing information with the council in terms of where their costs are, what have you. Obviously, they would have to pass a budget, a line item budget with some detail available to it. I'm sure the school department would make their budget available to you. I can't imagine that, it's not a top secret document.
I didn't say it was. And
I was being facetious, obviously, but again, these are all public matters, so, I think it's just a matter of just sharing information to make sure people have all the information, that's all, that's basically my point. And the point about the spending piece is, your city auditor should be able to identify what's net school spending and what's non-net school spending based on what flows through his books on an annual basis.
thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I'm just going to go to a bit of a technical matter.
Of course.
We hadn't seen any kind of a transfer from the charter school assessment prior to this year. ever occur. And so that's why, what led to the question about what made up the assessment and how would it become available. So what we're considering before us tonight are two transfers that are coming from that because apparently it was overestimated given the projections.
Sure, okay.
So it appears this was the first time that happened, or if it wasn't, this is the first time it came before us. So from.
Well, again, all this information in terms of what the estimates are, what the actuals are, is all available on the DESE website. And
Right, so-
I'll be happy to provide you with
Right.
some links to that if there's something that you want to check sporadically or what have you.
Well, I'm not worried about the amount of it, but what was surprising to us or just unfamiliar to us was that it even existed to be transferred from. Because I think our perception of that number was just, it came and it went.
Well, and
And
you may have been dealing with a very stable population of charter school enrollment, too. I mean, that could be the case as well, in that you didn't have a huge fluctuation. I've seen in some cases, it looks like an EKG, from one year to the next. But again, there's other communities where it's fairly stable in terms of what that percentage is in terms of, so it may not have been a material amount that that there may be a change.
I just wanted to add to that the reason why that came about is because normally, that information is not really being looked at. I reached out to the auditor and I said, hey, I'm looking online, and based on what I see in the budget and what's actually going through online, I think there's a surplus there. Let's talk about it.
Okay.
I don't think that was ever done in the past. So if we were short, let's say if we projected 12 million and it came in at 11 million, I don't think the school department was reaching out to the auditor in the past.
Okay.
I wasn't here, so I can't really speak for them, but I
Okay.
know that that's how it came about this year.
Okay, so my question then would be, if that did happen in the past and there was not that communication, what happened to the $1 million? It just sat in the school budget as available for spending?
No,
It's not in our budget. It's,
it's on the city side of the budget. It's not on the school budget. It's like employee benefits.
So then it just stayed on the city side?
That's correct.
So to Counselor McGivern's question, it wouldn't be that it didn't come back, it never went out.
That's correct. That's
Well,
absolutely correct.
that's interesting. So it's just like the benefit side. If the unemployment cost
The
was
free cash.
lower, the money
Exactly.
would just stay on the city
Exactly.
side.
Yep.
Exactly.
Okay, so
And then it
that
ne-
would explain why we never saw this before.
and then it never really it never became a problem because as you see on page 4, in the last 3 years, we were spending above net school spending.
Right.
So it was never a question of, if there was $1 million left on the table, that went to free cash, or if there was 500,000 that went to free cash. It never really came into question because you guys, the city met their net school spending obligation.
Right, but that is very important for us to understand because we sort of had a pot of money sitting there that we didn't even recognize, if you know what I mean.
Sure,
And
sure.
now it's gone. And the city's broke and the school department's broke. I mean, do you know what I mean? But, so it's important for us to understand either what we have, what we had, and, what it means. But from my experience, and I mean, I've been on the council long enough that I can't say I'm a newbie. On the other hand, the perception was sort of, school department budget's over there and we're over here, and all we do with that part is, it's a number and we say yes, and we focus on this other part. And I mean, from my perception, that's been pretty much how it's been, which seems like that was way too hands-off from a budget perspective from the city overall, from what I'm hearing.
And you're right. Since I've been here, I've worked really hard to just tear down that wall. Like, we are a department of this city. I meet with your city auditor, I meet with your treasurer, I meet with Rory and some of the finance team. I meet with them on a weekly basis. That started when I got here because I realized that there was this divide. school department's over there, the city's over here. And I understand that in order to make any progress, that we do have to work together. And that's why I'm meeting with
Right.
the city on a weekly basis.
Well, and the thing of it is, just speaking for myself, it was just, coming on, it's the way it is, I just accepted it. I didn't object to it.
Sure.
Do you know what I mean? I didn't necessarily think it was right or wrong, I just thought, well, that's the way it is, and that's the way we do it. But now that we're all in a bind, certainly we all have to be much more collaborative. We're having to make very unpleasant decisions about what we can keep going, what we can't, and how to use the funds. So this is very helpful, but that's just why we were surprised, or I'll speak for myself, why I was surprised.
Yeah, just briefly, and thanks for explaining that, Anthony. So, is it Mr. Sullivan?
Jay is fine.
Jay, okay. Jay, you mentioned that if you use the charter school excess money towards the transportation, that could hurt us even more.
Well, it won't count towards net school spending if
It
that's
won't.
the case. No,
Because
it won't.
this year, we already didn't make it,
Yeah. So,
right?
yeah.
So it doesn't really matter.
There is, and again, it's not the end of the world if you don't meet net school spending. Obviously, we encourage districts to meet net school spending, but there's no penalty involved
Right.
until you reach what we would consider to be a material amount, and that would be 5% of your net school spending, and you're nowhere near that.
Right.
So again, I'm not encouraging people to fund below net school spending, but it's not the end of the world if you don't. If you budget sufficiently, we expect to see the budget for the school department and that combined with the city resources to meet the net school spending. If you're not budget sufficiently, you'll probably hear from us. But if you're budgeting sufficiently and as a result of the ins and outs of what happens with the budget on an ongoing basis, and it's less than 5%, it just carries forward to the next year and just gets added to next year's requirement.
Right. And this extra money, let's say you said it goes to the city, so it's in the city pot. Let's say if there's $700,000.
Yeah.
So now the school committee can't do nothing with it. It has to come to the council.
A city.
Exactly.
The school, that's correct, because the city council would have to appropriate that money to the schools to make it available to them.
And they can do that.
Well, you can, as the
We can
city
do
council,
that.
you're the appropriating authority, absolutely.
So, okay, so that money doesn't go back anywhere. It goes into general fund and we can appropriate that towards the expenses.
The stuff that's on the city side of the budget, absolutely. But our regulations basically say if the school department budget has money at the end of the year and they have not met that school spending, that money is supposed to be put aside for the school department without further appropriation.
Right.
So that they can use that in the following year. Money that's on the city side, like this charter example that we just talked about, if the charter tuition comes in less, that's city money, that's just gonna end up going to free cash
Free cash.
at the end of the year.
Right, but,
Can we utilize that now? It's not the end of the year.
Well, yeah, as long as
but
you,
that's what's before us.
Yeah.
Right, that's what I mean,
Items
but it's not the end of the year yet.
3 and 4.
No.
Well, almost.
Okay. No, that's all.
I mean, if you wanted to verify the numbers or something along those lines, that's obviously doing your due diligence to make
Oh, right.
sure.
Let's make sure that it's.
Yeah, so that's
okay.
fine, and then they could act, and I'm sure, well, again, at this point in time, I'm not exactly sure what the schools could do with that money, to be honest. And I defer.
Oh, right.
I
No,
defer to
I know
the
what
folks
you're
in
It's
the
saying.
already
school
the end of
department.
May.
No, it just,
Well, again, it could be met in the last month, that's the whole issue.
right. Well, I just want to get some clarification on that. It gives me a better understanding on how this all works. And
Sure.
next year could be different, totally different because of the
Question.
change in the charters. Okay. Because it's unusual that and I thank Tony for looking at that. And, if the council down the road can get an idea, or maybe we can find that website saying, well, halfway through the year, this is what's going on, and there's going to be a little excess here. And like I said, I think Councilman McGivern talked about, having a city auditor that is in touch with everybody, all departments, and the council to keep us informed. So we can make the decisions and appropriate the proper way.
Generally, as a rule, we publish what the governor's proposed budget in January when he proposes it, which includes what his proposal is for Chapter 70, as well as the net school spending numbers for each city and town in the Commonwealth, every school district. we don't, House Ways and Means, as the budget goes through its iterations.
Right.
House Ways and Means, House, Senate Ways and Means, Senate. We don't publish those numbers because we're not, they run their own numbers. So, the only numbers that we publish are when the governor's budget comes out in January, that's on our website, and then the final budget, when it gets passed, hopefully come July 1.
Sometimes it's not on that date.
They've been
Yeah.
very good. They've been
They're
very
good.
good.
Yeah.
It's,
Yeah. Well, I'd like to get, yeah, if you could get us that, whatever that website is.
sure, yeah, I'll be happy to. I'll yeah.
Get that to
I'll
me,
email a bunch of links to Anthony, and he can pass them along.
That'd be great, thank you.
And there's also something there that shows compliance. Or you can go on to there's another link that you can see, like a 10-year cycle in terms of for your particular district or other districts if you wanted to look at that.
Okay, thank you.
So in terms of the employee benefits on the city side and the charter school tuition on the city side, is that how it's held in every community?
For the most part, well, unless you're a regional school district, obviously. If you're a regional school district, it's part of the school committee appropriation. But for municipal districts like Holyoke, most of the time, it's very rare that employee benefits are in the school committee appropriation.
Would there be a reason that you would want to do that ever?
I don't know if there was extreme volatility, I don't know. It's hard to say.
Because I think that came up at our last meeting, and that was one of the questions.
I could answer that. In Springfield, the benefits were on their side of the books, and the reason is because they're funded at the minimum requirement, right? So what it allowed them to do is actually review those expenses. Springfield didn't want to not spend at least the minimum, but with benefits being on their books and them monitoring the expenses on a regular basis and doing budget projections, it allowed the flexibility to say, wait a minute, I see a surplus here of $200,000. I know that if I don't spend that money, the city's not going to meet net school spending. So I want to move that $200,000 and I don't want to invest in like a tutoring program or I want to invest in computers. So with the fact that they're funded at the very minimum level, it gives the school committee it gives the school department a little bit of control of making sure that we meet that amount. When those expenses are not in the school department's budget, there's no control on that. There's no way of me, if there's a surplus there, I don't even have access to it because it's not in my books.
So the city is self-insured for unemployment, and is the school department as part of the city self-insured? So if it was on your side of the budget, would you change that configuration, or does it remain the same that you're self-insured?
We'd have to find money elsewhere in our budget to cover the deficit. Right now, we're asking.
But you would want the transfer of what would normally have been spent on the city side, with the goal that you would hopefully reduce it, I would assume.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, why would you want to do it?
Right.
Okay. I think I get it.
Joe?
Dollar for dollar, it's counted the same way, but the benefits, you have a better bang for your dollars when you put all the unions, all the employees together, looking for health insurance deals that make sense. And we don't give enough to our employees when it comes to health benefits. The benefits are in our budget. What we found out is charter school reimbursement is not in our budget, and found out it's not in the school department budget. That's what threw us for a loop.
But it is in our
It's
budget.
not in our budget.
Yeah, it is.
Part of our calculation.
No. I'm talking about our line item budget. There is no line
Oh,
item.
it's just part of the,
There's no.
it's on the chair.
That was the question that really threw us for a loop, because we've never made a transfer or we've never appropriated it because, and I don't want to get off on a tangent here, but charter school and reimbursements sometimes have been treated like just a wash through. The city's giving it to them. The money is spent in the charter schools minus the formula, which goes back to the schools. And I think, and I'm not going to speak for our prior auditor, but I think that's the way it's been set up for years.
Well, I think by law, it's an offset to net school spending as well, because, net school spending, you can't supplant minimum local contribution with other funds. So that's one of the reasons why it's an add-on. So in essence, if you had a $70 million charter school, or $70 million net school spending, and you got $500,000 in charter reimbursement, you have to spend at least $70,500,000, because that money, you didn't put up, you can't use that $500,000 in charter tuition reimbursement to supplant local money, the minimum local contribution. We expect you to be spending, obviously, the Chapter 70 money that we give, But again, all that money goes to the general fund as well, so it has to be because it has to be appropriated. So it's all general aid,
Right, so,
to some degree.
so truly,
But we don't with the charter school reimbursement, or we haven't.
Well, the money comes into the city coffers. Yeah.
we just didn't know it.
It's on the cherry sheet is where it is.
Right. As is the charter school, what you have to pay for tuition is also on the cherry sheet
Yes.
as well. Exactly.
But we don't vote on the cherry sheet. We vote on the line item budget.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, because in essence, what you see is the net.
The monies that end up in the charter schools and are spent on the students in the charter schools, does the city got responsibility for that?
No, the charters
Once it
have.
leaves the city?
The charter has a responsibility for that, and the charters are overseen by the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education.
So once it goes through the city, we're done.
Well, again, once that money gets paid out to the charter school, it's up to the charter school, and they're overseen by our charter school office and the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education.
Right, but if I'm understanding what you've said correctly, over the last few years, each year, we've had perhaps a fairly significant amount of money remaining in free cash on the city side from this charter school assessment, because we've never transferred anything from it to the schools until right now.
Well, if the initial assessment was high and it came in lower than that, yes, then that would be true. I wasn't, I hadn't looked that up
We'd
before I
have to
came here,
look.
I apologize, I probably should
But
have.
that will be an
That would make
important
sense.
thing, I think, for us to understand.
Is that the same with choice as well, Jay?
Same as with choice, exactly.
So I just think that's an important thing to understand.
Yeah, they have prior years, 3 years back.
Yeah. And I guess it would be our auditor that would do that, right, appropriately? Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Let's balance the budget, come on.
Right.
Sorry.
Joe, do you have another question, or? No?
Thanks. I do,
Oh, okay.
thanks.
With that, if there's no other questions, that was order
7.
6 and 7, pick them up as a package.
Well, we
Do you wanna-
didn't do 6 yet because,
Last three
For
fiscal years, they got
requesting
the
a line
information.
item budget for this
No.
fiscal year, for last fiscal years.
3 fiscal years.
Do you guys have that? Number 6, I'm requesting a line item budget for this fiscal year in the last 3 years for the Hoyoke Public Schools and other programs that come through your department, such as Halo.
no,
Yes, I do. It's item number 6. It's
6?
labeled
Okay.
at the top.
All right.
So you have FY 17, 16, 15, and 14 by object code.
Okay. So that was received.
so my recollection of the discussion around that was that certain of the programs and expenses, such for the rent and the programming and that, was part of net school spending, which is the core mission that we need to make sure we're meeting. And then other things were maybe great programs, but discretionary or optional or whatever. And I think that's what we were trying to get a handle on from the budget point of view. I mean, I don't know if anybody else remembers it differently, but that's, I think, why we were talking about Halo, because we were perceiving that as an optional program. While it may be great, it may be good, but there are other adult education programs in the city. If we're looking at, doing basics and we're looking at kids walking to school and things like this, potentially. So I think that's where that question kind of drove out
Okay.
from. I don't know. Maybe, Mr. Chairman, you have a different memory of that, but.
Do you guys have a comment to her question on that, or?
I don't know why the question came, we're just complying with the order. I think, I'm not sure who asked for the line item budget, but I did provide it in the
Counselor
packet.
Leahy.
I think something that'll, this includes everything in our adjusted appropriation. And on page 6 of the first item we just reviewed, it explains how we got to the school department's appropriation. So it starts with net school spending, it adds the transportation, and then it backs out the charter assessments, and it backs out. So the school department's budget is 60, in FY, it's closer to 64 million, not the 81 million in which is the net school spending requirement. The line item budget that I did prepare reflects our adjusted appropriation, which is the 65 million. And I provided it for 4 years.
I think, to answer your question, though, about the items that, the only items that, that come before you that are above, that fall outside of net school spending that we currently spend money on as a school department is the lease for the central office, right? Which we've had a lot of discussion about in the
Right.
last year. The cost of transportation. And then the third item has been the Halo rent, right? Those are the three areas that fall outside of net school spending. At the meeting we had last time, there was concerns about the Halo rent, given that I can't remember which counselor, but had concerns about the fact that we had space in other facilities that we could use. And what I had explained at the time is we do use the space for other programs, not just adult education, but I understood, and, I do understand that concern, and we have discussed making other arrangements in terms of, if we're gonna use that space, working with HCC, and to procure those services or that space, otherwise. So, I had mentioned to, my feelings were we're able to take that off the table, that rent, but those are the three areas that are part of the budget.
Right, and I think somehow that discussion got to this
Yeah.
request because we were then
Right.
realizing we've never really seen the lines. And I think it just sort of,
Yeah.
but we just got this today, so, but
Right.
thank you for providing it. But that's my recollection of how we got there. Yes, I think I'm the one that piped up and said, well, have them donate the rent to you.
Right,
They have
right.
deeper pockets than we do right now.
But we don't, so that's it in terms of the things that we don't pay any other rents.
Right.
And then obviously the transportation is a significant.
And that's a required thing,
Right.
but how we do it, you went into some depth with us as to how that could be changed.
Right, and Anthony provided documentation around transportation tonight, substantial documentation.
Which document might that be?
It's right here. Item 2 and 3.
Excuse me.
One's more of a PowerPoint, the other one's the numbers, of which, if you look at increase.
So Todd, just to add some context, I was intrigued when I got this request, and I guess what I was attempting to do in this summary is to show the council that costs have been going up across the entire state. I know how sometimes it's what we would like to do is say, hey, transportation was $1 million, we're gonna level fund it at $1 million. That's a little hard to do when you got multi-year contracts with, fuel escalator clauses and CPI, and you got such a transient population. But In Holyoke in particular, we have a large population of special needs students. And in their IEPs, they require transportation. We're at around 24%, which is very, very, very high in comparison to other communities in the state. One of the things that I did do is we hired a consultant to come in and review our SPED department.
Right.
And we wanted them to look at special ed transportation as well, and they gave us some really good areas to target. They said, bus utilization is low, only 58% of your buses are, running 58% full. You have some students that live in the same neighborhood, they're going to a couple different schools, but a lot of your buses are doing single tier routes. Only 27% of our buses were doing double tiers. So they basically gave us an area to focus on, and I've consulted with a routing specialist to do some modeling around that. And we're prepared to release, to talk about, or to release our start and end times. And one of the things that we weighed heavily on our start and end times is making sure that we did whatever we can to manage these costs. Last year before I got here, they did the same analysis, but they focused on regular ed transportation, and were able to eliminate 3 routes. But what that presentation and what the consultant is saying is, why did you guys look at regular ed transportation? That's only
Your issue is the other one.
$1.5 million out of the entire $7.5 million budget. You could ignore that entire budget and focus on special ed transportation, and that's what we did. Another method we plan on employing is, this is going to be the 3rd year of a 3-year contract. We do plan on going out to bid, and there's some strategies that we can employ for FY19 that would hopefully stabilize the costs or provide savings. It's hard to tell, when you put on an RFP, you kind of cross your fingers and hope that, the lowest bidder is lower than what, yeah, exactly.
So the bottom line then is, whether we meet net school spending or not, we're in the situation now where we have the obligations for the transportation that we have to meet, and whether we use this charter school money for a net school expense that counts or an expense that doesn't count, we still have to meet these requirements. And just look at it that I guess we're in a right-sizing situation, and that next year the goal is to be in a different place than in this yet again transition year. Would that be fair to say?
It's fair to say that I can promise you that I'm going to do everything that I can to, we put a transportation committee review together. I'm going to make sure that that committee's informed on what our options are and where we're going, and we're going to do everything we can to stabilize, to control those costs.
I mean, and I'm not trying to sit here and say that what the answer is next year, but that this year, what we're looking at and going forward is still transitional and corrective, rather than
Yes.
operating in the new reality, if you will.
So again, when I came to the council last year, we knew, unfortunately, Anthony was only here for a couple months.
Right.
But we knew that we were going to fall short. The budget that was put out fell short of what we thought at the time was $800,000. We stated that at the time, with a commitment that we would look at this in the following year. I think our ask is under that, but it's still, the gap exists. Now, I am more confident going into the FY18 year that the budget that you received, and the mayor referenced that in his letter to the council, does talk about how transportation is, we're more confident. It is a volatile number, because you don't know the number of kids and homeless transportation, and there's a lot of variability. But we're more confident, we're more aligned. We've also done a lot more work in chipping away at, that's why we're releasing different start and end times, and we're consolidating routes, and we're doing what we can. So we're in a much better place for this upcoming year. But for the FY17 year, what we predicted,
Came pretty much
it
true.
was pretty much true. We're asking for a little less than what we thought the gap was going to be going into the FY17 school year.
Thank you.
And my hope is that next year we don't have to come to the council, that what we put it forward is in fact, we do think it's a much, much closer projection than what has been true for the last 2 years, which we came in, 2 years ago when I arrived, I was told at that point too that we were short in transportation.
Right.
And that was known. But I appreciate the work that's been done with the city and the schools to be, that our projection, hopefully we won't be having that conversation.
Well, I appreciate the sharing of the information, although it's more than I even knew enough to ask initially, but.
Peter?
Yeah, thanks again for the info, and I'm glad you're working on trying to keep the costs in line. And I know it's not easy because transportation, gas, and you got a contract. You said the next contract is usually like a 3-year contract with somebody?
Yes.
We're in the second year of a 3-year contract, so next year is the last year, and we'll be rebidding the contract for FY19.
Yeah, and so hopefully, you never know what you're going to get, but if you get a good bid and you make some changes, it could keep the costs somewhat in line. The state's 24%, it went up over the last 5 years? Is that what it was?
The state average was about 26%. And then I looked at comparable districts, districts that have high special needs, high low income. That average was about 42%.
And I mean, this is something in the last, 5 years, plus it's based on your population too.
Yeah,
Especially, and that's where most of the money is spent.
Yeah, it's also homeless.
Homeless and
Homeless is a moving target for us as well, because we never know exactly how many students. We get some reimbursement, but we don't get full reimbursement for homeless transportation.
Right.
And that counts towards the number that we project is homeless transportation is part of that number.
Right, is that also school choice too?
It's also eligible for net
Eligible?
school spending, but it's not school choice.
It's not school, so that, yeah. But if somebody has to leave from here to go to another school, there's no, they have their
No,
own
there's no
transportation.
transportation for
They have their own transportation.
They have to
But the,
provide their own.
but the people that are homeless, the homeless population.
Homeless,
Kenny Vento,
Shelters.
yes, yeah.
Doesn't necessarily mean they're in a shelter. The majority of our homeless population isn't in a shelter. They're in, a lot of it, what's called doubled up.
Right.
So
right.
you move from wherever and you're living with an aunt or you're living with a cousin. You're considered homeless until you find
A permanent.
It
own
only
residence.
counts for a year?
Once you get that designation, and if you find permanent housing, you're entitled to McKinney-Vento transportation for the rest of the year.
But it can continue if you remain.
So if you're living with your sister, you're homeless?
Uh,
That's crazy.
They don't have they're not with their,
The law is, the law is pretty,
It's my opinion.
Yeah.
I mean, really? But
pretty
anyway,
open.
it is the law, so
Yeah.
you have to follow it.
and go ahead. if you
I
want
just
to.
wanted that, on that trend that the transportation one, you could see that, 2014 was a really bad year. If I had to guess, that's when like gas prices were through the roof. Anybody who went out to bid in that year, and most districts, have
Did.
2 or 3 year, the whole transportation industry changed because gas prices were so high. So, and by changing their pricing, that, that kind of stuck going
Right.
forward. They didn't reduce their,
Had to go down 'cause the
the
price of
industry
gas.
because gas prices went down. So a lot of districts have a fuel escalator clause, but for the most part, transportation has skyrocketed across the entire state. And I guess everywhere, not just Massachusetts.
Right.
Making some good money.
And the last question,
Making mad money.
nothing, just a what if, and I think I asked this 2 weeks ago at the meeting, is if there was no extra money in the charter school assessment, how would this transportation be taken care of? Or would it be? It has to be, right?
I would have been making a request either way, and then I don't know if it would have been free cash or surpluses from other accounts, or
If there's no free cash and
we wouldn't have been able to pay our transportation bills,
that's not, it has to be paid.
and we'd be violating the contract, and I don't know what would happen at that point, truthfully.
Right, I mean, so it was,
Come after
I've never
the
been
city.
in that
Yeah.
situation,
but we were fortunate there happened to be a little bit extra in that.
for sure.
If it wasn't, we'd be in really dire needs.
We'd be looking at the
Paying.
piggy bank, Peter.
Like, yeah, it wouldn't be good. We don't want to do that. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, can you review our free cash status?
No. Yeah, I'm just kidding. In essence, we didn't approve the 5,000 for the personnel department for advertising. We most likely won't approve the Halo because
Right.
Dr. Strike said he doesn't want it, so that's
Well, I'd
37,500.
love.
didn't say he didn't want it.
I withdrew, we
that part.
withdrew.
That would be overstated.
He said he didn't want it. That's what I heard, so we're not going to approve it. So in essence, what'll happen is the 400,000 from free cash minus all the other expenditures kind of brings us around, it would look like 43,000 left,
Okay.
based on all the stuff that Bellamy sent me that was approved versus not approved. And I'll confirm that tomorrow again, because there's some stuff here he has down that we did not do.
And you're presuming we're approving these things tonight?
Well, that's how, I mean, Brian used to
That's
do
how
it.
you always do it,
Brian
yeah.
used to do it that way. He would, I think it was a better approach. You would, for free cash, when you're requesting it, you assume that's approved, and if it's not, you put it back in the cycle. Here, the way this one is, it's all over the board on saying this was requested, whether or not it was approved, I have to go back and remember what was and what not approved. That messes up the total. So here, based on this list, which I think is a little outdated, it'd be about 43,000 if I'm correct. But I'll confirm that tomorrow. I've been wrong before.
No, not by much.
So with that, the first one is 6 and 7.
I would offer a motion that those have been complied with.
Okay.
I'll
is
second that.
Second, so motion that they've been complied with. It was seconded. All is in favor?
Aye.
All is opposed?
Want a motion to take up item 2?
How about number 1? We never did that, huh?
I never received them,
Never did.
so
I was
lay on the
ignoring
table.
Lay on the table, or the,
Motion to lay, first take it off the table, item number 1, which is prior
moved.
minutes of meeting.
Second.
All's in favor, all's
Aye.
opposed.
Aye.
We never got them,
we never got them, so,
Lay on the table. All's in favor.
Aye.
aye.
All's opposed. Item number 2 is the request for 400,000 from free cash to transportation, and then there's item number 3, which is 321 from charter assessment to transportation. We wanna do
And
those.
item 4 is from charter assessment, too.
All right, well,
Oh, you
before,
want to stick with
first, let's,
transportation? Is that what you want to do?
Mr. Sullivan, thank you very much for coming down. I see that you have to go. I don't blame
Thank
you.
you.
You have a ride, so.
Thank you very
Thank you so much
It was
for your
helpful.
insight.
If you can get those emails to, or the email to Anthony to get to us.
Yeah.
Safe travels.
All right, so with that, item 2 and 3.
So
do
you'd
you
like a
want-
motion to suspend the rules and take up item 2 and 3 as a package?
I'd second that.
Second.
All's in favor?
Aye.
All's opposed? So, I mean, we took them up in the last meeting. You just heard about net school spending and how this stuff relates to it. Are there any questions to it? Joe?
One question, I'm in favor of both transfers. Free cash, no problem, even though we're running out, but it is an operational expense. And with the explanation of charter school reimbursement, I think, it's something good to know for all of us, but acceptable also. Just my only question, Anthony, is when you were looking at charter school reimbursement, what was there? What was the dollar figure you found?
I don't know if it's billed quarterly or every 3 months, there's charges. So when I
I'm
looked
not going to
at,
hold you to this, but just kind of a ballpark.
so what I was looking at is what we budgeted, right? So part of I gave you a lot of information, so I'm not gonna try to have you look for it, but I did include something on charters. And the attachment Yeah, on the back of it, the last page, what I was looking at was what we budgeted, which was what was in the FY17. It's actually on the back. We budgeted 11,855,000, and that's what made up our appropriation. So rather than giving us the 81 million to meet net school spending, the city backed out $11.8 million so that they can pay for the charter assessments. Then I went to the DESI's website to look at what they, on a quarterly basis, they update what the current year charter assessment's gonna be, and I saw that it was around 10.9 million. So when I saw those two numbers, I was like, wait a minute, this doesn't look right, and I said, Bellamy, can I see what charges are actually going through your account? And when he showed me, I was like, okay, based on these monthly charges, you project it out, we're probably gonna spend around 10.9, we budgeted 11.8, there's some money in there. We also looked at school choice, and on the school choice side, we were short, so it's not the difference between those numbers because we had to adjust for the shortfall in school choice. He has the actual detailed numbers. This is just what I was looking for when I was reviewing it. You know, I was trying to help
Right.
explore options on how to address some of our deficits.
But I'm gonna guess that he never even really analyzed that because he would have had really no reason to. If it just was flowing and going,
Right.
right?
Well, we heard tonight, he should be analyzing.
should be.
Well,
Yeah,
right, but I
right.
don't even think it was something he was even looking at.
It's, you know, I hate to keep bringing up Springfield, but in Springfield, we were on the same accounting system. We're not here. And the good thing about being on the same accounting system is that nothing got approved unless the auditor literally approved it. So all the transfers, all the transactions and everything. But in Springfield, we were in regular contact and we looked at, you know, I want to know what's going on with transportation, and I want to know what's going on with with charters and a lot of the stuff was actually on our books. So the auditor in Springfield kind of left us alone, but he did want to know what was going on with transportation, because he knew that if we were falling short or anything like that, we would be coming to the city and asking for money. And if there was a surplus there, he wanted to know because they can sweep that surplus, because it doesn't affect net school spending. They'd be able to sweep that surplus and use it for whatever they want.
So with our new auditor, you have the opportunity, we can start off on the right foot.
Love to work with them. I've been meeting with them on a weekly basis.
Perfect.
We go through any issues that cross our departments. We talk about things that have come up during the week, big projects coming up. And truthfully, that's how I've developed a relationship with even Bellamy, to be able to come to him and
Well,
point
right,
out
and
some of the
then-
things that we have.
Right, and don't interpret what I'm saying as any criticism of Bellamy. I mean, he came in to be the
Oh, he's
interim
great.
auditor and
I-
ended up being here, way longer than he planned. So, I mean, that was a different situation anyway, but,
Bellamy's been very helpful and
yeah. But I think
Trying
just
to-
going forward, to have that much tighter
I agree.
sounds like the right way to go. All right.
I'd be happy to work with Josh as often as he'd like. But we do meet weekly.
All right.
Thanks. So
Any other questions? Joe, Peter? No?
I'll make a motion to approve the transfers
So that'd be item 2 and 3 as a
as a
package.
package. Mhm.
Is there a second? It's motion
Second that.
to approve. Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? And the last one is item number 4 with regards to this current issue.
Motion to take up.
Motion is to take it off the table.
Table.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All
Aye.
opposed? This is 300,000 from charter school assessment to unemployment.
Motion to approve.
Motion
Second.
is to approve. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? The next one is item number 5. Make a motion move from the table.
So move.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? This we also took up at the last meeting, but was sent back from the full council. This is for the Halo rent expense.
So.
Oh, actually, no, I'll correct that. This one was actually tabled to then get some more information.
Right.
So this
Right.
was tabled, we're taking it up again.
So I'll make a motion to deny.
Motion is denied based on the information given.
What, I missed,
Only because we can't, we either have to approve or deny. We can't.
Yeah, in essence, he's saying give it leave to withdraw.
okay.
But
So
you
deny-
can't do that,
You can't
so you
do
have
that,
to
the
deny it.
financial trans, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll second that.
So motion is to deny, yeah, we're not being mean. All's in favor?
Aye.
All's
Aye.
opposed?
That's it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Unemployment?
Then we just did it.
We did it.
We just
That was
did it.
number 4.
You're not going to let me talk about unemployment?
You already have, haven't you? We can let you talk
We
about it.
have it memorized, Joe.
Make a motion to reconsider, Joe?
I was going to let you off the hook, and I only have 3 questions.
Okay, go ahead.
Oh, hold on,
VQ,
hold on.
voluntary quit.
All right, motion to reconsider item number 4.
Or, second.
All's in favor?
Aye.
All's opposed? Counselor McGivern, you had some questions?
Voluntary quit. It contradicts
EQ.
eligibility for unemployment to me. Anthony, what does voluntary quit mean when a person is no longer working with the schools? If you quit a job, you can't collect unemployment.
You can file,
Yeah.
and the decision
Our
on
city
whether or
tells us that
not,
they challenge it automatically.
the decision on whether or not to award that claim is on the state. Yeah, voluntary quit is, it could be a few situations. I don't know, I don't know how much details you want to get into, but there are some cases where, things aren't working out, and it's
Forced voluntary quit, they go and say they were forced.
But there's others where this job is tough and they can't take it and they quit. But I did want to, so part of why this is in the packet is because I want to let the council know, we're not just sitting here doing nothing. We do consult with UTCA, and for the quarter that, for October through May, we did avoid $85,000 in unemployment expenses because of the work that we're doing. And we meet with them on a quarterly basis, and every time we meet with them, we get some pretty good feedback on what areas we should be targeting. That's where those letters that we started sending out when people used to not work with us for the summer, collect unemployment, come work with us.
Stop to that.
We stopped that, and that's, working with this partner, we were, that was a recommendation. They have an attorney that deals with unemployment law. Those are some of the recommendations that come out on a quarterly basis. So I just want to point out that we are looking at this, we're pointing, there were some savings, although the costs are astronomically higher. Because of the work we're doing, we've saved $85,000 just in the last quarter. Avoided costs, winning claims, and because of the work that they're doing.
Refresh our memory for a moment, because I know, or I remember from the last meeting, we had a discussion that the costs were high because you did lay us, because you have been downsizing
Yeah.
going forward, but that once you get to the place where you need to be,
Should
then
stabilize.
the turnover isn't gonna be what the correction was,
Yeah, although, I
right?
mean, even.
I mean, you'll still have.
Well, even with this upcoming year, though, we've had our budget got tighter and our enrollment declines a little bit. We're gonna have, we do have to
Will
lay
have.
off, we have fewer positions, so yeah, that's gonna be an impact. So I can't promise that that's not gonna happen year after year.
Well, right, but maybe not at the same
No,
level.
hopefully not. No.
We budgeted, our budget includes a higher amount next year for unemployment too, because we do realize.
Because of the continued.
We did have to downsize, we were looking at a $5 million deficit, and
Right.
that wasn't gonna go away, and we can't present the budget that's not balanced, so.
Right.
The explanation for the teachers just conflicts with the effective dates on the sheets that you gave us, Anthony. Can you explain that? the effective dates are June, for the most part, of the 50-some-odd teachers, or June or July.
So that's the effective date of when they filed their claim and when
So
the
they collected
benefits
over the
kicked.
summer.
We didn't take them back.
Those
Those
are
were
people that we
real-
wouldn't have taken back, yeah.
That was legitimate unemployment.
Really unemployed.
What I was referring to earlier is collecting during the summer and then coming back in September.
I understand. Never mind.
So there were 50 that were permanently laid off? Is that what your question is, Joe?
51.
That were permanently laid off?
That received benefits
At some
during
point
that.
during the year. Some of them
At
may.
some point
Well,
during
but-
the year.
Right,
Yep,
right. But they were real layoffs,
they didn't come back.
They didn't come back.
so that's the real number.
But that could be due to, licensure. That could be
Right,
due.
right, right, but I mean,
It's
I
not
think-
like, we didn't eliminate 51 positions.
Right.
If
Thank
that's
you.
right.
Yeah.
These are 51 bodies that are no longer with the school department, but we're still paying someone to do the same job. And that's the disappointing
same
part
amount?
about unemployment costs, is we're not seeing the benefit from laying a person off. And don't, I know, I'm sure there's some downsizing in your budget, but the bulk of this unemployment cost is not downsizing.
It's also, one could argue that, you don't want to, if we're laying somebody off, in some cases, it's for a good reason.
I'm trying to,
They're not,
I'm trying not to get into that
Steve, could
because
you
I think that's.
Yeah, no, I just add to
Elaborate.
that.
That's
So
your job.
You're right. I mean, so some of those cases, they just were not a good fit.
Yeah.
And we have that every year. Obviously, to your point, we'd like to have much fewer of that because we want stability from year to year. But yes, the bulk of those people were not a good fit.
It's disappointing, and I'll just leave it at that, because I think we all want the same thing. And these are good dollars, much of them being used for a bad reason. Fair enough?
I couldn't agree with you more on that. I mean, we've got to get better on hiring the right people and retaining the right people from your,
Yeah.
so you're right.
I'm done, Mr. Chairman.
Joe, that was only 2 out of your 3, just to.
No, there was, someone else took Linda took my third one.
I'm sorry.
Oh, that's fine, it's teamwork.
Informality at the round table.
All right, so we did a motion to reconsider the 300,000.
Motion
Motion is to
to approve.
Second.
All's in favor, all
Aye.
opposed, so that was approved. All right, so I think you guys are done.
Thank you very much.
No
Oh,
problem.
no problem.
We still have to get to the full city council,
Right.
They're easier than we are,
Number
as a rule.
number 8, item moved from the table.
Can we take up 8 and 9 as a package?
Yeah, absolutely. 8 and 9, take up as a package? No, not yet, we haven't done that. All's in favor? All's opposed? These we already taken up for the treasurer on the bond language that she wanted.
Motion,
One,
they've been complied with.
Yeah, she said that earlier, complied with.
well, I get,
No?
Joe, is it complied with, or if they're already done, or?
Yeah.
I guess just say comply with it.
Yeah, we took it the other night.
Yeah, it was listed on this, and then we scheduled this, and then the special meeting took,
It was removed from committee.
so,
I think no one took them out.
Out of the jacket?
well, no, they're gone from the jacket. Just copies were made for tonight. I guess procedure-wise, because it's on the agenda, so we don't violate open meeting law, do we just say it was complied with? I think that'd be the safe way?
Yeah.
All right. That's a consensus? It's on the record? All right.
Yeah, complied with.
So the motion is that it was complied with because it was taken up in a special meeting as well as a regular meeting.
Correct.
So, all's in favor?
Aye.
All's opposed, so that's done, and I think,
That's it.
item 10, oh no, item 10 should have been laid on the table, they were getting that.
Oh, it's
So that's the, engineer
Annex.
getting the assessment for the annex house, so make a
Emotional,
motion
table,
to,
or lay on a table?
To take it up?
well, yeah, take it up first, so
Okay.
take item number 10 up.
Second.
All
Second.
those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion is to table it because they're gonna get us the report,
Sure.
I was told.
I'll second that.
All right, so all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
All right. Is that it? Yep. We already did the grants.
Those are the grants, so that is it. Make a motion to adjourn
So move.
because we don't want to keep Linda here any longer. She was here till 11 o'clock last night.
Have I been tapping the table? No.
No, it's fine.
No, you run a very efficient meeting.
Second. All in favor? Yeah, that's done.
Adjourn, that's done, that's done.
Motion to adjourn?
Oh, wait, just,
Second.
yeah,
Oh.
all in favor?
Aye. Okay.
Everyone got this, I know Linda was going through it.
I go through it a
And it
little
was
bit, too.
supposed to be emailed to all the counselors, so.
We did.
We got, I was, yeah, we did get it. It's a lot of reading here.
I can even look at the top to see if everybody got it.
I just want to make sure you did receive it, so in case you're
You keep
you're
that
having
with the
trouble
guests, yeah.
sleeping tonight, you can look at it again.
Well, it is interesting.
You got it.
I got a nice printer at home.
Oh, so you get it all
Jeez,
copied
I
up.
don't know how to put black and white, it's like came out in color.
Budget cuts.
That's not good, the ink goes through real quick.
Yes.
You didn't email it to everybody, because I had a call this afternoon.
Maybe just a finance
I
thing?
mean, he may have now, but he didn't have.
I'll follow up and make sure he does.
Like the second email after